Balancing the complexities of being a business owners and being, like human. Hello. It is intense. We have a lot of things going all the time within and around ourselves that we need to kind of figure out so that we can make the strides that we need to make in order to achieve success. And that's why we have Maria here today. She's going to tell us a little bit about herself, why this topic matters to her, and why it should matter to you. Maria, welcome to the show.
Well, welcome. Thank you so much, Shauna. I appreciate being on your show. And of course, it's one of the topics that I love talking about is about reinventing ourselves. Because how many times do we really reinvent ourselves? Just about every single day. Hi there, everyone. I am Maria Belanic, and I am a grief coach. And now I didn't start out to be a grief coach. I don't think anyone ever does. But this is what life threw at me. And so I always like to say, we've all heard about the 5 stages of grief. Well, I'm here to tell you it's a bunch of BS. Because realistically, what it does is it keeps us stuck in something that we feel that we need to tick boxes off. And also, as an entrepreneur, how many times do we feel that we have to follow what someone else has set? And we think it's set in stone. And it really isn't. And so I believe that we become the women that we are to be through evolving, through everything that we go through in life. And a lot of times in life, and I was like this, I expected or I was waiting for someone to save me. When we're dealing in those low periods, the struggles, the challenges, it's almost like we want someone to throw us a lifeline. And we're waiting and waiting for it. And I think we fall into that story of how many times as a woman, our prince is going to come and save us. Well, I hate to tell you this, there isn't a prince that's coming to save us. We are becoming our own heroines, our own heroes of our own stories. And that's what led me to become a grief coach, is basically saying, I got to be my own saver, my own heroine, sort of to say, and stop asking permission of everyone else around me who's telling me what I should think, what I should feel. Because let's face it, being our authentic self is actually being our own vulnerable self. And that's when I realized that, hey, I got to do this work for myself and yet surround myself with supportive people. And I think that's what Shauna is. Shauna is a great cheerleader.
Well, right? and over and above that, though, I'm just going to go, let's sweep that under the rug for a minute. No, truly, though, I think the grand scheme of things here is just allowing yourself to be a human first, without requiring yourself to do something about the experiences that you're feeling within and around yourself. Does that sound right?
Yeah, it really does. I think we forget that we are humans first with a whole range of emotions. I think we bought into the stories or the myths about how we're supposed to feel at any given time, what we're supposed to think. And realistically, like, I'm kind of like, I'm not a mind, like I can't read your mind. I wish I could.
No, you don't.
Or anyone else's. I mean, in my previous career, I used to be a realtor, and I used to say, look, if I was that person on the mountain,
right,
that knew exactly what was going, I mean, I think that's where we sort of we're putting other people on this pedestal. Mm-hmm. And yes, some people have made it and they are a success. And we have been told, follow what someone else who is successful in your field does. Sometimes what we forget is we think that we're supposed to turn into them. Mm-hmm. We're not. We're our own selves. Following just means see what they're doing and adapt it to your own personality, to your own alignment of your core values.
Absolutely. And my understanding is that's what you did when you were exploring this world of grief, because as you said, many people who perceive from the outside that, oh, this person's experienced traumatic and going through grief, they ought to, like you just said, it's the 5 or the 7 stages, and they ought to do these things. That didn't sit right with you, did it? It didn't. And I'm thinking, first of all, I'd like you to share that story, but then also looking at this from a broad scale, people who are running a business are often expected to do so as though they are not also living a life, potentially experiencing loss or excitement or any number of other very beautiful, complex emotions at the same time as needing to do the things in their business. So I guess the number one question is, how did you emerge on the other side of this checklist grief experience into a more authentic and genuine version of experiencing grief? And how has that impacted you in your life and your business? Because those two things are indeed intricately interconnected.
It really is. And a lot of times we forget that everything is interconnected. When my son passed away, it shattered my world. And of course, I was in pain. I was in a dark place. And then on top of that, I had people keep telling me, like, why are you stuck? Why aren't you overing it? So a lot of times when we're dealing in the struggle and the challenges, we also get sort of like another layer thrown on top, in the sense of people saying, as you said, there's these 5 stages of grief. Why haven't I moved on? Why haven't I ticked these boxes and sort of things? And that kept me stuck or trapped for 10 whole years. And I was in a career, right, where I was dealing. I mean, I was an entrepreneur. I was a real estate agent, and I still went through the motions of doing my work, but hiding behind a facade, sort of thing. Like during the day, as I was working, I was more mechanical. And I mean, I've been a realtor for 26 years. So then, of course, I went through the motions and I could do it. But then at what cost? Because then by the time I got home, I was so much in pain. Like it was almost like, it's like this armor that we put on. And then when we get home, we're taking it off. And we're so much in pain that no one is seeing that. And it comes to the point where we have a hard time even showing it because the people around us aren't supportive. And so because of that, it's that mask. And for me personally, my moment came when I thought grief wasn't going anywhere. I was going to grieve my son forever. And that to many people will sound daunting. It's almost like, oh my God, like you're going to grieve forever, like you're going to be this sad. And what I found was actually that was freedom. That was freedom to say, you know what, this is my reality. And if other people don't get it, then that's their problem, not mine. And that's what made me become stronger, because I ended up going into my core values, my authenticity, and being vulnerable. And also by being vulnerable, we actually set boundaries. And that is something that I think as an entrepreneur, a soulpreneur, we forget to do. We sort of have everyone else take away our time.
Yeah.
You smiling and you're like, okay, I agree. Everyone is like barging in, like, oh, yeah, you're an entrepreneur. Sure, you got more time here. Do this for me. Do this.
And it's not just time. And that's the beauty of, I think, what you're saying. It's like, it's not just time. It's also your energy. A lot of times it's your money. And there's also that aspect of it's your emotional energy. So when people are constantly being drawing from you, you require the boundaries, you require the systems set in place for you to be able to reinforce those boundaries, to say, hey, no, you don't get all of me. Not, at least not all of the time, right? But in this context, in this very specific context, yes, absolutely. But on that same note, in this specific context, I am my own and I'm allowed to feel all the things. And what that looks like in this beautiful space where we dance between life and business is the joys of making more sales, of seeing your clients succeed, of seeing yourself succeed, of living your life fully, and the frustrations of pushing that boulder up the hill in the first place. And those two things very much do coexist. And so having those boundaries help us to navigate that with a little bit more kindness.
So true. And that is so excellent. I mean, part of what I do is I've created the 5 pillars of care. And within those 5 pillars of care, because during my 10 years that I was stuck, my health also suffered. And as you said, energy is so important. And energy is all of us. It's our physical, it's our mental, it's our emotional, it's even our spiritual.
Absolutely.
And so, and I don't even like using the word balance because it's almost like, being on a teeter-totter.
Right.
I'm probably going to be dating myself when I say teeter-totter. I'm sure it's called something else nowadays.
I'm not sure. My children use teeter-totter. Sometimes they use seesaw.
Okay.
So
And
that's
so,
all right. And actually, to your point about balance, I agree. I think balance is a very misleading term, and it's not actually realistically applicable to this sort of conversation. But I had a mentor of mine a number of years ago introduced me to the concept of flow rather
mhm,
than balance, and that felt a lot more aligned. What do you think of that?
I love the word flow, right? It's so much easier because realistically, it's about being in alignment or being in unity rather than because balance feels like, "Oh, I got to work some more to,
Mhm.
right? You think of the pie and you're kind of like, okay, I got to get it into equal pieces. Like, seriously. Sometimes, cutting a pie, one person's going to get a little bit more, another person's going to get a little bit less.
And interestingly, I like that. I actually really love this idea of pie because somebody's going to want or need more, and some person is going to want or need less. And those wants and needs could vary. I'll tell you, when I had my grandmother over for our big family dinners, she'll say on one day, no, 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 just a sliver, dear, just a sliver, dear. And another day, she'll say, no, no, keep it coming. And you have to be able and willing to flow between those states of reality.
Yeah. And I love that when you say the flow, the states of reality, because it is. Because sometimes our body needs more focus, right? And the same thing, like sometimes our mental wellness needs more focus than the other aspects. And it's not that we're ignoring anything. It's basically that flow of says, okay, it's like tapping into our inner wisdom of today, this or this moment. This is what I need at this time, this area, more so than others. And it's knowing that everything is a whole.
Right.
Because I think sometimes, and I noticed even in grief, or even sometimes we like to compartmentalize everything, right? It's like, okay, here's this little box here, here's this little box here, here, this little box here. Well, no, we're more like that. What is it? That introverted 8, like the infinity.
The infinity.
And that's what our emotions are like. That's what our
Mhm.
thoughts are. And so if we see ourselves as this more movement, as the flow, as you said, right?
Mhm.
As infinity, then we kind of know that everything, I love that word flow.
It what goes around comes around, right? And we just need to allow it to happen. I'll be honest with you. I have days where I am a right boss. I get everything done that I wanted to get done and then some. My clients are saying, "Oh my God, you weren't going to get that done till next week. I can't believe you did it." And I'm like, "I know, thank you." And I have other days where I am a potato.
Mhm.
And it's okay. I'm
Yeah.
allowed to experience those things because I am human and because I have the boundaries and the systems and processes set in place that give me permission, that I've given myself permission to feel those things when I need to feel them and to lean into that. And I think this is a really important part of how you approach your business as a grief coach because grief holds hands with a lot of other emotions and a
Mhm.
lot of other situational experiences that impact our choices, our boundaries, and all that jazz.
Well,
And you're helping people with that. You're
mhm.
guiding people to a space where they're feeling more confident in navigating that maze.
Well, I guide or navigate towards basically saying finding your pockets of peace. I like to say it's about finding your peace on the other side of loss. Because realistically, what my peace is going to look like will be different than, say, your peace.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's so true because I think a lot of people sort of, when they think of grief, is like, oh, it's always going to be sad. Well, grief is really complex. It's a lot of emotions all together. It's sometimes two or three emotions at the same time. And really, it's living life because we have moments of sadness, we have moments of joy, we have moments of anger, we have moments of happiness. And so nothing is ever like 100% in the sense of, I always like to say, I've never seen a person being happy 24/7. Like, if, I mean, hey, unless you're one of these planks or somebody pumping in air, right? Like a balloon.
Yeah.
Um, we all, as human beings, go through a range of emotions, and grief is one of them because we've lost. I mean, I deal with the loss of a person, especially the loss of a child.
Right.
And grief, actually, I always go, is a huge umbrella because it can encompass, I mean, okay, I'm going to go back to my previous job as a realtor, where sometimes, each day to even have a listing or a sale, if you didn't get it, well, in some ways that's kind of grief. So it's like you didn't get the job.
Hmm.
So that can cause a grief too. And so even people like the loss of a relationship, the loss of a friend,
And
it's
interestingly, you're speaking my language, because what you're making me think of now is something else that I was researching about grief, because I am human too, and of course I've experienced it. Everyone has. And what I think is interesting is grief can and does exist in moments of celebration. When you consider even getting married, everybody celebrates. Everybody is saying, "Oh my gosh, look at you guys, you're in love, it's beautiful." And it is, and it's so joyous and lovely. And you're also losing a part of yourself, a part of your autonomy. You're
Mhm.
losing, for a lot of women, you're losing your name. Some people are attached to that. Some people have made the hard choice to either hyphenate their name or to completely lose there's a lot involved with that. And so having that duality of emotion exist within one thing can feel like a lot.
And when you're saying that, to me, what came up is that a lot of times we, as human beings, ignore our own needs in the sense of giving ourselves compassion,
Right.
right? A lot of times, I mean, and I'm guilty of this at times too, and especially even beforehand, I was a lot harsher on myself. Like, to other people, I would give them the benefit of the doubt, things like that. But for my own self,
Yeah.
it's kind of like, why
We're
didn't you know this? Why are you still
Yeah.
here?
Oh
Why?
my gosh. We are our own worst enemies, aren't we? Oh my goodness. How many times have I been like, you should have done that? Or whatever it is. You're right. You're right.
Yeah. And we go through life. I mean, that is part of being human.
Mm.
A lot of times we feel that we have control over a lot of things that we don't. I mean, realistically, we have control over our own selves. We have no control over sort of our outside world, what happens outside of our realm.
Hmm.
But a lot of times, and I don't know if it's just for women and for moms, we all think we're super powered,
I mean,
uh, right? Of
aren't
course.
we though?
And the thing is, sometimes I always go, control is because we are thinking with today's thoughts, right? Of what we know of today compared to, and then judging our own selves
Hmm.
for our past of who we were before. Does that make
Right.
sense?
It does. It does, because you can't, it's, I'm a very big music person, and it makes me think of what's that song? I wish that I knew what I know now
Mm.
when I was younger, right? And it's that. But you didn't though.
You
You
didn't.
didn't. You learned, you grew, you are who you are today, and that's beautiful. And you can continue to carry that wisdom and knowledge as you progress through your life, but you didn't know it then. You weren't who you are now then.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay. It just is what it is.
Yeah.
I
Well,
like that. I like that.
and I think, and that's what we forget sometimes. We
Yeah.
kind of look at our younger selves, and sometimes our younger selves could have even been last week.
It's true. It could have been 5 minutes ago. Let's be real.
Right? And all of a sudden we learn something new. And
Yeah.
this is what sort of that evolution is. And the evolving happens in grief, happens in life. And it's just about saying each day, each moment, we can evolve and maybe learn something different and yet stop judging ourselves for what we didn't know. It's, there's only so much that we know. And there's that's what's it called? Like the blind spots, right?
Yeah,
We only know what we know.
that's right.
And then sometimes we can meet someone, a mentor or coach, and they can show us either a different way of viewing something, a different perspective, and that can kind of go, oh, wow, yes, okay, right?
That's right. That's right. Isn't it? There's a Maya Angelou quote about that. When you know better, do better, right?
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is, if you don't know better yet, then you can't do better. So it's okay. But then when you don't know better, when you know better, do better. Now,
Mhm.
with that, I want to ask you, because I know that we touched on a lot of the experiences, a lot of the very deep-seated experiences. And you mentioned finding pockets of peace. And that's a really important aspect. I'm going to invite you to share your last words of wisdom about that. What are some of the steps you can take to find those pockets of peace? And what does that even look like?
Well, thank you, Shauna. Yeah, so pockets of peace is what I named in the sense of finding that calmness in ourselves. There's a lot of challenges, a lot of struggles that we go through. And when we are allowing that to overwhelm us, it causes more stress and it actually harms our body and our mental wellness. Finding pockets of peace is actually giving yourselves compassion, but also finding those moments where you're fully present and only taking breaths for your own self. Basically, it's that you're just calming everything down and just focusing on that present. And in that, I'm actually offering a gift for your audience, which is Discover Your Pockets of Peace. And it could be the littlest of things of enjoying your cup of coffee. That's why Shauna must have known that I love coffee. And
I was going to say, I've already had my coffee for today, so I had to switch to water, but that coffee looks delicious.
it really does. And a lot of times it's about being fully present because I do this
Right.
sometimes too. I'm in front of the computer, I'm drinking my coffee, but I'm not enjoying it. And it's really about taking those pockets or those moments where you get to enjoy the feeling of, if you're in the shower, of having the shower, the water hitting you, and just enjoying and actually being grateful that you have the warm water, right? It's these little things that we can do just to be fully present. Probably not
That makes so
explaining
much
it as
sense.
good, but that's okay.
No, that makes so much sense. And it really taps into, and I think this is a really important action point. It's just, it taps into that mindfulness and gratitude. If you
Mhm.
can take a moment to do that, you are starting your journey on discovering those pockets of peace, even throughout your experience of grief, which may or may not come to pass, as you revealed in your own story. And I think that's really beautiful. And I want to invite everyone to please reach out to Maria. She has some really amazing insights that she wasn't even able to contribute to this conversation because of our time constraints. So you want to dive into that world. 100%. And with that, know that this conversation isn't over. Please leave comments, share with your friends, keep the conversation going. We're not going anywhere. we will be here to talk to you every step of the way. And with that, we're closing season 1. This is episode 85, and we will join one another again in season 2 in September. And I'm looking forward to seeing all of you along the way, and you will be enjoying a lot of really cool replays throughout the summer. So with that, have a great rest of your year, your vacation, if you're in the hemisphere where it is summer.